I never thought I'd be the type of person to call the police on my own family. But there I was, staring at my phone screen at 2 a.m. in a hotel room 3 states away, watching my entire extended family throwing what looked like a house party in my living room. The same living room I'd worked 18-hour days for 3 years to afford. The same house I'd bought with my own money, that I'd deliberately kept secret from them for exactly this reason. Let me back up. My name is Jennifer Martinez, and I'm 34 years old. I work in tech consulting, which means I travel about 60% of the time and make what most people would consider really good money. 6 figures. The kind of money that makes people's eyes light up when they find out, especially family members who've been struggling to make ends meet. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. The one who got good grades, went to college on scholarships, and landed a stable job right out of school. My parents, Maria and Carlos, immigrated from Mexico when I was 5, and they worked themselves to the bone to give me and my siblings opportunities they never had. I respect that sacrifice more than I can express. But somewhere along the way, that respect became expectation. And expectation became exploitation. It started small, like these things always do. A phone call here and there asking if I could help out with Mom's medical bills. Could I cover my brother Miguel's car payment just this once? My sister Rosa needed help with her kids' school supplies. Always just temporary. Always just until they got back on their feet. Always with promises to pay me back that somehow never materialized. But I helped, because that's what family does, right? That's what I told myself every time I transferred another $1,000 to someone's account. Every time I paid for another family dinner. Every time I covered another emergency that seemed to happen with suspicious regularity. The requests grew bolder over time. Mom started asking about my salary during Sunday dinners, wanting to know exactly how much I was making. "Mija, you make so much money. Surely you can help your poor mother with the rent this month." Dad would chime in with commentary about how I was blessed and how those blessings should be shared with family. My siblings started treating me like a walking ATM, calling me when they needed something but rarely checking in just to talk. The breaking point should have been last Christmas when I found out they'd been telling extended family that I was basically funding their lifestyle. Cousins I barely spoke to started reaching out, asking for loans. But even then, I made excuses. I told myself they were just proud of my success. I told myself family was complicated. What finally woke me up was a conversation I overheard during my nephew's birthday party. I'd paid for the entire thing, of course. The venue, the cake, the entertainment. I was in the kitchen helping clean up when I heard my sister Rosa talking to our cousin Carmen in the living room. "Girl, you need to get on Jennifer's good side," Rosa was saying. "She's basically our family bank at this point. I haven't paid my own rent in like 6 months. Carmen laughed. "Seriously? How do you manage that?" "Easy. You just call her crying about the kids or whatever. She can't say no. She makes like $120K a year and has no kids, no husband. What else is she going to spend it on? Might as well keep it in the family." I stood there holding a stack of dirty plates, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't family helping family. This was manipulation. This was taking advantage of someone who loved them too much to say no. That night, I went home to my tiny one-bedroom apartment and made a decision. I was going to buy a house, a real house, and I wasn't going to tell anyone in my family about it until after I'd moved in. Maybe not even then. For the next 8 months, I worked like a woman possessed. I saved every penny I could, took on extra projects, worked weekends. I researched neighborhoods obsessively, looking for something that felt like home. Something that was mine and mine alone. Something they couldn't take away from me or make me feel guilty about having. When I found the house, I knew it was perfect immediately. A modest 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. Nothing fancy, but it had a big kitchen, hardwood floors, and a backyard where I could finally plant the garden I'd been dreaming about since college. The asking price was $280,000, and I had enough for a substantial down payment. I put in an offer that same day. The whole process felt surreal. Here I was, making one of the biggest decisions of my life, and I couldn't share it with anyone. I couldn't call my mom to get excited about paint colors. I couldn't ask my dad to come look at the foundation. I couldn't invite my siblings over to see the space and help me plan where to put furniture, but I also couldn't risk them knowing, because I knew exactly what would happen. They'd want to help by suggesting what I should do with each room. Mom would immediately start planning how often she could visit, probably daily. Rosa would want to know if her kids could come over whenever they wanted. Miguel would somehow need to store something in my garage, just temporarily. And before I knew it, this house that I'd worked so hard for would become another family resource that everyone felt entitled to use. The closing happened on a Tuesday in March. I took the day off work and sat in a conference room while lawyers shuffled papers and explained things I'd already researched extensively. When they handed me the keys, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pure, uncomplicated joy. This was mine. I'd earned it. Nobody could take it away from me. I spent the first month slowly moving in, taking my time to make it exactly what I wanted. I painted the kitchen a warm yellow that made me smile every morning. I bought furniture piece by piece, choosing things I loved rather than things that were practical or that others would approve of. I planted tomatoes and herbs in the backyard. I hung pictures on the walls, pictures of places I'd traveled for work, friends I'd made, moments that belonged to me alone. For the first time in my adult life, I had a space that felt completely mine. No one called asking to borrow money for rent because they didn't know I was paying a mortgage. No one suggested family gatherings at my place because they didn't know I had a place to suggest. When I came home from work trips, I could just exist without having to explain my choices or defend my decisions. It was peaceful in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Of course, the family noticed that something was different. Mom started commenting that I seemed distant during our weekly phone calls. Rosa asked why I wasn't available for babysitting as often. Miguel wondered why I hadn't offered to help with his latest financial crisis. I deflected as best I could, giving vague answers about being busy with work or needing some space to focus on my career. They didn't push too hard initially. I think they assumed I was going through some kind of phase, that I'd come back around eventually when I realized how much I needed family. They'd seen me pull back before, usually when the financial requests got particularly overwhelming, but I'd always come back. Always resumed my role as the family safety net. This time was different, though I don't think they realized it yet. The first sign of trouble came about 2 months after I'd moved in. I was at Mom and Dad's house for Sunday dinner, a tradition I'd maintained even though I was trying to create some distance. Mom made my favorite meal, carne asada with homemade tortillas, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Like maybe I could have both, my independence and my family relationships. Then, Dad started asking questions. "Mija, you seem different lately," he said, cutting into his steak. More relaxed. "Did you get a promotion at work?" "No, Dad. Same job." He exchanged a look with Mom that I pretended not to notice. "It's just that you seem, I don't know, like you're not worried about money anymore." "I've always been careful with money." "CC, but this is different. You used to stress about your rent, about your car payment. Now you seem like—" He searched for the words. "Like you don't have those worries." My stomach clenched. "I'm just in a good place right now." Rosa, who'd been quiet up until then, suddenly perked up. "Actually, that reminds me. I've been trying to reach you about Tommy's school registration fees. They're due next week and I'm short about $400. Can you help me out?" Here it was. The test. The moment where I'd normally say yes without hesitation, transfer the money that night, and add it to the mental list of loans that would never be repaid. "I'm sorry, Rosa, but I can't this time." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone stopped eating. Mom put down her fork. Dad frowned. Rosa stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean you can't?" Rosa asked finally. "I mean, I can't help with that right now. But it's for Tommy's school, for your nephew." The guilt trip was immediate and familiar. The implication that saying no meant I didn't care about my nephew's education, that I was selfish, that I was forgetting where I came from. "I understand it's important, but I have my own expenses to worry about." "What expenses?" Miguel jumped in. "You live in that tiny apartment. Your car is paid off. What could you possibly be spending money on that's more important than family? I felt the walls closing in. This was exactly why I hadn't told them about the house. Because in their minds, any money I had belonged to the family collective. Any expenses that weren't for them were automatically selfish and unnecessary. I just can't help right now, I repeated. The dinner ended awkwardly, with Rosa making pointed comments about how some people forget where they come from, and Mom giving me worried looks like I was sick. I left feeling guilty and angry in equal measure. Guilty because Tommy really did need those school fees paid. Angry because I shouldn't have to justify my financial decisions to anyone. That night, I sat in my kitchen, and reminded myself why I'd made this choice. I looked around at the space I'd created, at the life I was building for myself, and I felt that peace again. This was worth protecting, but I also knew this was just the beginning. My family wasn't going to give up easily. They'd been depending on me for too long, had gotten too comfortable with my money being available whenever they needed it. They were going to dig deeper, push harder, try to figure out what had changed and how to change it back. I just didn't realize how far they'd be willing to go. The breaking point came 6 weeks later in the most violating way I could have imagined. I was in Chicago for a 3-day conference, one of those intensive tech summits where you barely leave the hotel. I'd been looking forward to coming home, to sleeping in my own bed and spending the weekend in my garden. I was in my hotel room Wednesday night reviewing notes from the day's sessions when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived next door. We'd only spoken a few times since I'd moved in, but she seemed sweet and had mentioned that she liked to keep an eye on the neighborhood. "Jennifer, I'm so sorry to bother you, dear, but I had to call. There are people in your house." My blood went cold. "What do you mean, people in my house?" "Well, there are cars in your driveway, and I can see lights on, and there's music playing. It looks like a party. I thought maybe you'd given someone permission to use your house while you were away, but it seemed strange that you wouldn't mention it." My hands started shaking. "Mrs. Patterson, I didn't give anyone permission to be in my house. Are you sure the lights are on?" "Oh, yes, dear. And I can see people moving around through the windows. Should I call the police?" "No, don't call yet. Let me check something first. I'll call you back." I hung up and immediately opened the app for my security system. I'd installed cameras when I moved in, more for package deliveries than anything else. But now I was grateful for the paranoia that had made me spring for the premium monitoring service. It took a few seconds for the live feed to load, and when it did, I thought I was hallucinating. My living room was full of people, not strangers, family. I could see Rosa on my couch, laughing at something someone was saying. Miguel was in my kitchen, apparently making drinks. Mom and Dad were sitting at my dining room table, which was covered with food I recognized from family gatherings. There were cousins I hadn't seen in months, family friends, even some neighbors from their street. They were throwing a party, in my house, while I was 3 states away. I scrolled through the other camera feeds with growing horror. Someone's kids were running around upstairs, in my bedroom. My nephew Tommy was jumping on my bed while his cousins went through my closet. Adults were using my guest bathroom, my office, my kitchen like they owned the place. How had they even gotten in? I kept my doors locked, obviously. The windows were secured. I'd never given anyone a key. Then I remembered. Mom still had the spare key I'd given her years ago to my apartment. I'd never asked for it back because I'd moved so suddenly, and honestly, I'd forgotten she had it, but apparently she'd figured out where I lived and had a copy made. They'd been planning this. This wasn't a spontaneous gathering that had somehow ended up at my house. This was deliberate. They'd waited until they knew I was out of town, let themselves in, and decided to use my home as their personal party venue. I watched the feed for nearly an hour, feeling sick to my stomach. They were going through my things. Mom was in my kitchen, opening cabinets and commenting on my dishes. Rosa was taking selfies in my living room. Someone had opened my refrigerator and was eating food I'd been saving. But what really broke me was seeing Dad in my office, looking through papers on my desk, financial documents, bank statements, proof of the life I'd been building without them. I watched him pick up my mortgage statement, and even through the grainy security footage, I could see his expression change as he read it. They knew now. They knew I'd bought a house. They knew I'd been living here for months without telling them. They knew I'd been lying by omission every time they asked about my living situation. And instead of respecting my privacy, instead of wondering why I might have felt the need to keep this from them, they'd violated my space in the most fundamental way possible. They'd treated my home like it was theirs to use whenever they wanted. I sat in that hotel room, watching strangers and family members alike wander through the space I'd worked so hard to create, and I realized something had changed permanently. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't just about setting boundaries around my finances. This was about my right to exist as an independent adult, to have a private life, to own something that was truly mine. They'd crossed a line I didn't even know existed until they'd trampled all over it. I looked at my phone, at Mrs. Patterson's number still in my recent calls, and I made a decision that would change everything between my family and me forever. I was going to call the police. Not Mrs. Patterson. Not my parents to ask for an explanation. Not Rosa to demand they leave immediately. The police. Because what they were doing wasn't just disrespectful or presumptuous. It was illegal. They were trespassing in my home, using my property without permission, violating my privacy in ways that would be criminal if strangers had done it. The fact that we shared DNA didn't make it any less wrong. I stared at my phone for a long time, watching my family continue their unauthorized party through the security feed. Every few minutes, I'd see someone new wandering into frame, a cousin taking pictures in front of my fireplace, one of Rosa's friends admiring my kitchen backsplash, kids I barely recognized racing up and down my stairs. The anger came in waves, building stronger each time I watched Dad flip through another page of my financial documents or saw Mom rearranging items on my bookshelf like she was redecorating. But underneath the anger was something else, something that felt like a fundamental shift in how I understood my relationship with my family. For years, I'd told myself that their behavior was just cultural differences, just family being family. In Mexican families, we take care of each other. We share what we have. Privacy is less important than connection. I'd used these explanations to justify every boundary violation, every financial demand, every guilt trip about not being available enough. But this wasn't about culture. This was about respect, and the complete lack of it. I pulled up my notes app and started typing, documenting everything I was seeing, timestamps, who was in which room, what they were doing. If I was going to call the police, I needed to be prepared to explain the situation clearly and factually. 9:47 p.m. At least 15 people visible in house. Rosa Martinez posting social media photos from my living room. 9:52 p.m. Carlos Martinez, father, reviewing personal documents in home office without permission. 9:55 p.m. Multiple children running unsupervised through bedrooms, jumping on furniture. 10:03 p.m. Unknown adults using master bathroom, going through medicine cabinet. As I typed, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was the natural escalation of a pattern that had been building for years. First, they'd claimed my money. Then they'd claimed my time. Now they were claiming my space. Where would it end? When would there be anything left that was truly mine? I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for them, all the times I'd convinced myself that saying no made me selfish, all the times I'd prioritized their comfort over my own boundaries because family comes first. But family should also mean respect. It should mean considering how your actions affect the people you claim to love. It should mean recognizing that caring for someone doesn't give you unlimited access to their resources. They'd never learned that lesson because I'd never taught it to them. Every time they'd pushed a boundary, I'd moved it further back instead of holding the line. Every time they'd taken something without asking, I'd pretended it was okay instead of addressing it. I'd been so afraid of being seen as selfish or ungrateful that I'd trained them to see me as a resource rather than a person. Well, that ended tonight. I called Mrs. Patterson back first. Mrs. Patterson, it's Jennifer. I need you to know that I did not give anyone permission to be in my house. These people are trespassing." "Oh my goodness, dear. Should I call 911? "Actually, I'm going to call them myself. But thank you for letting me know what was happening." "Of course, honey. I'll keep an eye out for the police cars." Next, I called the non-emergency police line for my county. I'd looked it up while documenting the break-in, wanting to handle this properly rather than tying up emergency resources. "County Police, how can I help you?" "I need to report a trespassing situation at my home. I'm currently out of state, but I have security footage showing multiple people inside my house without permission." "Are these people strangers to you, ma'am?" I hesitated for just a second. "No, they're family members, but I did not give them permission to enter my home and I want them removed." "I understand. Can you provide the address?" I gave them all the relevant information: my address, the fact that I was in Chicago, the number of people involved, confirmation that I had not given anyone permission to be there. The dispatcher was professional and matter-of-fact, which helped me stay calm. "We'll send officers to the location within the next hour. You mentioned you have security footage?" "Yes, I can access it remotely. I have clear video of people inside my home." "That's helpful. The officers may want to speak with you directly when they arrive. Will you be available by phone?" "Absolutely." After I hung up, I sat back in my hotel chair and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the sense that I was taking control of my own life. For the first time, I wasn't making excuses for their behavior or trying to manage their emotions. I wasn't worried about how this would make them feel or what they would think of me. I was simply protecting what was mine. The waiting was horrible. I kept refreshing the security feed, watching my family continue their party while having no idea what was coming. Part of me felt sick about what I was doing. These weren't strangers or criminals. They were my mom and dad, my siblings, my extended family. In a few minutes, police officers were going to knock on my door and force them to explain why they were in someone else's house without permission. But another part of me felt something like relief. After years of being the family pushover, after years of having my boundaries trampled, I was finally doing something that couldn't be argued with or manipulated or guilt-tripped away. The law was the law, regardless of our relationship. At 10:43 p.m., I saw the first police car pull into my driveway. The reaction inside the house was immediate and chaotic. Through the security camera, I watched people freeze, then start moving quickly. Someone turned off the music. Rosa grabbed her purse and headed for the back door. Miguel started talking rapidly to Dad, gesturing toward the front window, but they couldn't all leave quickly enough. When the officers knocked, there were still at least 10 people visible in my living room. My phone rang. "Ms. Martinez, this is Officer Johnson with County Police. We're at your residence now. Can you confirm that you did not give anyone permission to be in your home tonight?" "That's correct. I did not give anyone permission to enter my house. I'm currently in Chicago for business." "And these are family members?" "Yes, but that doesn't change the fact that they're trespassing." "Understood. We're going to need to speak with the individuals inside. Some of them are claiming they have permission to be here." Of course they were. "Officer, I can provide you with security footage showing exactly when they entered and what they've been doing inside my home. I never gave anyone permission to be here." "That would be helpful. Are you willing to press charges?" The question hung in the air. Pressing charges meant this would become official. It meant potential fines, court dates, permanent consequences. It meant crossing a line that could never be uncrossed, but they'd already crossed that line when they'd violated my home. "Yes," I said. "I want to press charges for trespassing." "Copy that. We'll document everything and be back in touch with you shortly." For the next hour, I watched through the security cameras as police officers interviewed my family members. I couldn't hear what was being said, but the body language told the story clearly enough. Dad was gesturing angrily, probably explaining that this was all a misunderstanding, that family doesn't trespass on family. Mom was crying, likely playing the victim card about how her ungrateful daughter was having her arrested. Rosa looked defiant, arms crossed, probably arguing that I was being ridiculous. Miguel appeared to be the only one who looked genuinely ashamed. One by one, people left. Some were escorted out by officers, others left on their own once they realized the party was over. I watched my cousin Carmen carry sleeping children to her car. I saw family friends I'd known for years walking past my security camera with their heads down. The house that had been full of unauthorized celebration an hour earlier was now empty except for police officers documenting the scene. Officer Johnson called me back around midnight. "Ms. Martinez, we've cleared all individuals from your property. We've issued citations for trespassing to 6 adults who were present when we arrived. The others had left by the time we made contact." 6 citations? Your parents, Carlos and Maria Martinez, your siblings, Rosa Martinez-Chen and Miguel Martinez, and 2 other individuals who claimed to be family friends. My parents, my siblings, people I'd shared holidays with, memories with, my entire life with. Now they had police citations because of me. What happens next? They'll need to appear in court or pay the fines within 30 days. We've also documented evidence of entry without permission. You mentioned they might have used a key? Yes, I believe my mother had a spare key to my previous apartment and may have had copies made. We'd recommend changing your locks immediately. And if you have any other security concerns, please don't hesitate to call. After the officer hung up, I sat in the silence of my hotel room and tried to process what had just happened. In the space of 3 hours, I'd gone from being the family helper to being the family enemy. I'd crossed a line that would fundamentally change every relationship I had with people I'd known my entire life, and somehow, despite the guilt and the sadness and the weight of what I'd done, I felt more at peace than I had in years. My phone started buzzing almost immediately, text after text after text. Rosa: "I can't believe you called the cops on your own family. What is wrong with you?" Miguel: "Mom is crying her eyes out. How could you do this to her?" My cousin Carmen: "This is insane, Jennifer. We're family." And then the call I'd been dreading. Mom's number on my screen. I almost didn't answer, but I knew I had to face this eventually. "Mija?" Her voice was small, shaky. "Why did you do this to us?" The guilt hit me like a physical blow. This was my mother, the woman who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for my school clothes, who'd taught me to make tamales, who'd been so proud when I'd graduated college. "Mom, you were in my house without permission." "It's not your house, it's family. When did you become so selfish? When did you decide that you're better than us? This isn't about being better than anyone. This is about respect." "Respect?" Her voice rose. "You want to talk about respect? You buy a house and don't tell your own mother? You let us find out by having police officers tell us we're trespassing in our own daughter's home? How did you even know where I lived?" A pause. "Miguel followed you home from work last month. We were worried about you, acting so strange, so distant. We thought maybe you were in trouble. Maybe you needed help." So it had been planned. They'd been investigating my life, tracking my movements, trying to figure out what I was hiding from them. When they'd discovered the house, instead of talking to me about it, they'd decided to use it as their personal event space. "Mom, you can't just go into someone's house when they're not there." "Someone?" Her voice cracked. "I'm not someone, Jennifer. I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. And this is how you repay me? By having me arrested?" The manipulation was so familiar, so practiced, that for a moment I almost fell back into the old pattern. Almost started apologizing, almost began explaining that I hadn't meant to hurt her, that I'd just been scared and overreacted. But then I thought about watching them go through my personal documents. I thought about strangers' children jumping on my bed. I thought about Rosa taking selfies in my living room while I was working 3 states away. "Mom, I need you to understand something. I bought this house because I needed space. I needed something that was mine. I didn't tell you about it because I knew this would happen. You'd start treating it like family property." "Family property? Is that what you think of us? Property? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. You think we just want to use you. You think we don't really love you." And there it was. The accusation designed to make me feel guilty for having boundaries. The suggestion that protecting myself meant I didn't believe in their love. The old Jennifer would have crumbled, would have started reassuring her that of course I knew they loved me. Of course I didn't think they were using me. Of course I was sorry for overreacting. But I wasn't the old Jennifer anymore. "Mom, People who love you don't go through your private documents when you're not home. They don't throw parties in your house without asking. They don't track your movements and make copies of your keys. We were trying to understand why you were pulling away from family. And instead of asking me directly, you decided to violate my privacy. Silence on the other end of the line. I have to go, Mom. We can talk more when I get home. When you get home to your secret house that's too good for your family? I hung up. The next 2 days in Chicago were surreal. I went through the motions of the conference, attending sessions and taking notes, but my mind was completely elsewhere. My phone was constantly buzzing with messages from family members, most of them variations on the same themes. How could you do this to us? Don't you love your family? What's wrong with you? A few were different. My Uncle Tony, Dad's brother, sent a message that surprised me. I heard what happened. I'm not taking sides, but I want you to know that some of us understand why you did what you did. Miguel's wife, Sarah, texted, I'm sorry this happened. Miguel feels terrible. He never thought it would go this far. But mostly, it was anger and accusations and guilt trips designed to make me question my decision. The thing was, I wasn't questioning it. For the first time in my adult life, I'd set a boundary and enforced it, regardless of how it made other people feel. I'd prioritized my own well-being over managing their emotions. And despite the chaos and the conflict and the guilt they were trying to make me feel, I knew I'd done the right thing. When I finally flew home on Friday afternoon, I drove straight to a locksmith. I had every lock on my house changed that same day. I also upgraded my security system and added motion sensors to every entrance. Mrs. Patterson came over while the locksmith was working. How are you doing, dear? This must have been quite a shock. I'm okay, I said, and realized I meant it. Thank you for calling me. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't noticed. Well, I've lived next door to a lot of families over the years, and I've learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who have the hardest time respecting our boundaries. Her words stayed with me as I spent the weekend reclaiming my space. I washed every piece of fabric they'd touched. I reorganized every room they'd been in. I replaced items they'd moved or used. It was like performing a cleansing ritual, removing every trace of their unauthorized presence. But I also did something else. I started planning how to move forward. The police citations were just the beginning. I knew my family well enough to know they weren't going to accept this quietly. They were going to escalate, probably in ways I couldn't predict. They were going to try to turn extended family against me, make me out to be the villain in this story. They were going to try every manipulation tactic they'd ever used to get me back in line. I needed to be prepared. I scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. I started researching estrangement support groups. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and began moving my finances where my family couldn't access or monitor them. Most importantly, I started writing down everything, every boundary violation, every financial demand, every guilt trip, every manipulation tactic. I documented the pattern of behavior that had led to this moment, creating a record I could refer to when they inevitably tried to gaslight me into believing I was overreacting, because I knew they would try. I knew they'd attempt to rewrite history, to make this about my selfishness rather than their boundary violations. I knew they'd try to make me feel crazy for thinking that what they'd done was wrong. But I also knew something else now, something I'd never fully understood before. I didn't need their approval to live my life. I didn't need their permission to have boundaries. I didn't need their validation to know that what I'd done was right. For 34 years, I'd been living my life trying to earn their love by being useful to them, by being the family ATM, the problem solver, the one who put everyone else's needs first. I'd thought that's what love looked like, sacrificing yourself for other people's comfort. But real love doesn't require you to disappear. Real love doesn't demand access to every part of your life. Real love respects boundaries, even when it doesn't understand them. As I sat in my living room that Sunday evening, in the house I'd worked so hard for, surrounded by locks they couldn't pick and security systems they couldn't bypass, I felt something I'd been searching for my entire adult life. I felt free. The battle wasn't over. I knew there would be consequences to face, relationships to navigate, family dynamics to rebuild or release, but for the first time, I was fighting for myself instead of against myself, and that made all the difference.